this is not the time, believe it or not, to stop looking at the video. We need everybody to look at that video, keep looking at that video, let that anger build, and then let's decide what we're going to do with that energy. It wasn't until we saw the remains of Emmett Till that people opened their eyes and realized we had a real problem. We were used to people being lynched, being shot, but it wasn't until we saw what they did to Emmett Till that made us wake up and stay woke. We can't shy away from it. They don't want you to look at it. But we must. It is time for Black America to get angry. It is. It's time to stop talking about it. We must do that. We must stop talking about it. It's time for us to start talking to each other. We talked about this, Chief, last week. Brother, you've been around. It's time to train, take time out, and we've got to teach these young folks. Remember what Harold Melvin said. It's time to teach a new way. And it is. The days of talking about what happened yesterday must be over. Then that you are probably more right than you realize. I believe it was you or the other brother, but America may be looking at her last time for a warning. I think it was James Baldwin who said the fire next time. But white folks know that. They do know it. And they are afraid, but we have to deal with them. We've got to deal with them. We've got to begin to meet, talk, and discuss strategies. We've got to teach our children how to be angry, but then what to do with that same anger. Chief, you know as well as I know. In Prince George's County, we knew these guys were riding around in these cruisers, and I knew if you looked under the spare tires and most of their trunks, you'd find that hood and that sheep. We knew it. But we figured out a way to try and overcome it. But now they're on their last leg. That generation of white police officers, they know their time is running short because blacks are becoming police officers. They are. But we've got to get smart. We've got to teach our young people to get smart. I spent a great deal of time today talking to those who came the generation after me. They got to wake up. They got to park their BMW and get out on the street and talk to these younger children. That's what we have to do. We got to teach them about that white officer who became a police officer to carry out the legacy of his family. We have a lot of them who became police officers so they could do just these kinds of things. We got to talk about it. I'm going to leave it there because, like Bubba, the more I think about it, the more angry I get. But I have to learn how to control that anger and use it in the right way. I'm going to leave it there, Chief.
Thank you, Phil. As always, we appreciate you, man, and take care of that cough. And Bubba, I'm going to let you respond to that. But before we do, I got to share a couple of comments that we've gotten from the chat room. You guys have lit it up. From Terrence. Terrence said that the fact that the taser was empty was revealed as well, had been fired twice already. Yeah. Terrence also continues to say, the youngsters are pulling parents to another level of thinking. Hip hop has done its job. And then he shared some more facts with us. He says, when you look at the wealth disparity, you've got 106,000 for blacks, and for whites, and 6,000 for blacks, No, he says the correction for whites it's 102,000 to blacks 6,000. But even with those corrections, you still see the disparity that we talked about earlier. So again, as I said earlier, there are parallel paths that need to be jumped on in order to bring this matter to a conclusion that will allow us to achieve a state of calm and peace. But before I even get into that, Bubba, I want you to respond to what Phil said. And, I'm sorry, that was $102 trillion. I'm sorry. Thank you, Terrence, for correcting me. I want you to respond to Phil, and then we want to talk a little bit about what Terrence was alluding to. And then, Ryan, I want to hear your thoughts about how the professional sports world has been responding to this whole situation, particularly as now the NFL is saying, "Oh, Colin, you may have been right." So, Bubba, go ahead and respond to Phil.
What I do, Brother Michael, is I talk to my children, and I try to teach especially my boys, to do the right thing if they're pulled over. Don't give them an opportunity to have an excuse to go further than what they may do if you cooperate, as far as like when they're pulled over, put your hands on the steering wheel, okay? And show that you are not in a position where you can create any kind of disturbance or violence with them.
Sure.
And just like Brother Brooks did, he was cooperating fully, man, to what was going on. When he took the breathalyzer test, he answered it correctly. He said, "Yes, I have been drinking." And the whole thing, he followed directions to the T. Even when the officer was giving him the eyeball treatment, he did it so long, I got dizzy watching it.
Sure.
So to go what Phil was saying, I do talk to my boys. I said, okay, this is the deal. Use your voice to speak up on racial injustices and racism and that type of thing. But do it in a way, try not to get violent.
Sure.
We got to do it like the way Martin Luther King was teaching us to do it, in a peaceful manner.
Right.
Stand up, protest, voice your opinion about the wrong things that's happening to you as an African American. Speak up, try to get laws and things like that changed to be more equal.
Sure.
To what the laws and the things that are not right for us, that's right for white people, and how they can get away with things that we can't.
Sure.
I tell them when you see, if you're on a job, a corporate job or something like that, don't take shortcuts like white people do, because you will pay the price for it. And they'll pull out that law and the rules and everything on you that they let the white people get away with, just like what Donald Trump just did. He got flanked. All of these boys are walking out of prison, just walking out. And Barr is, oh man, they're just such a bunch of crooks and criminals up there in Washington, D.C. and running the country. And President Donald Trump just fanning the flames and letting these guys have a free-for-all out there with their guns and with their brutality and all these kinds of things. And I don't know. I just try to teach my boys, especially my boys, to make a difference with the law as best you can. Try to stay in a corporative position if you get pulled over, so that you can come back home alive. And that's about it. That's all I can do right now, Mike.
All right.
So, yeah. Ryan, I mean, Phil picked up on what you're saying. He said, this is America's last shot.
Mm-hmm.
They got one last shot. How do you see this? Let's say they get it right. I mean, what shows that they get it right? I mean, we're seeing some things, some things that the corporate folks are doing, but that's for those of us who are kind of into that, who are reading, who are watching it. Other folks who are like in it probably want to see some other things. Or is it what they're doing? Are they doing the right thing, or is it about sustaining it? And how do you sustain this momentum? How do you keep everybody at this same fever pitch? Because we're such a here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, it's like we have ADD, when social ADD. 1 minute everything.
I think what we have here is a perfect storm. You have a global pandemic where most people are quarantined. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are out of work. So what else do they have to do? Somebody asked me when they were taken to the streets in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. You remember the Arab Spring of so many years ago. Why aren't Americans in the streets protesting? Say, well, we work for a living. Mm-hmm. Now, guess what? COVID-19, no worky. So guess what? We're going to take to the streets. Mm-hmm. So I hope they stay in the streets and they sustain this momentum. A positive first step would be for 2/3 of the state legislators to amend the 13th Amendment and abolish slavery once and for all in this country. Slavery is not abolished. Slaves were emancipated, but we are the only country in the Western world that has not abolished slavery. If you read the 13th Amendment, it reads, there's a little piece in it that says, unless you are a criminal, you're not free. You're a slave. So amending the 13th Amendment would be a positive first step. Again, federal oversight of all law enforcement, right down to the hamlet, to Mayberry, to El Paso, Henderson, Nevada, Greensboro, North Carolina. All cases involving police brutality resulting in death should come under immediate federal review. You take that power and authority away from the district attorney and the local yokels, and it goes straight to the Justice Department. Mm-hmm. And the FBI gets involved. Because that's what the problem is. The locals are calling the shots. The police are investigating the police. That should not be the case. Mm-hmm. So that will be another good first step. Now, in the world of sports, you have some NBA players that are having reservations about going back playing again, and they're blaming it on the uncertainty of the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. Well, when you add the racial unrest and this movement that's going on, a lot of those guys are saying, you know what? I don't even feel like playing basketball right now. Mm-hmm. I'm just, it's a distraction. And now you're starting to hear talk of NFL teams giving Colin Kaepernick a tryout. Well, the NFL has nothing to lose. It's probably going to be in front of an empty stadium anyway. So just sign him and he can just play in front of an empty stadium. It won't have the same impact. We don't have to worry about people protesting because the stadiums are probably going to be empty. So from a personal perspective, sports is not my bread and butter. It's something that I do on the side. Mm-hmm. We've gone this far without it. You know what? It's bread and circuses anyway. It's a distraction. I don't care. I love sports, but if I have to go without it, I'm going without it because there are bigger issues on the table. Bigger than the NFL, bigger than the NBA, bigger than Major League Baseball. I mean, let's just squash all of it and let's focus on this hour, this movement, because like you said, Thin Bad, this has a different feel to it. Mm-hmm. There were no Martin Luther Kings or Stokely Carmichaels giving people the signals. Okay, let's go protest. This happened. This was organic. Right. People took to the streets. They didn't have to be urged. There was nobody marching in the forefront of this thing. And today's generation, like I said, They don't